I can remember Malik always telling me to say, do what you do, man. And if you left it all out there on the floor, you can be proud of that.
He was the reason Kevin Garnett wore number 21, a long, athletic forward who played on both sides of the ball and never seemed to get tired. A player who made fans hold their breath whenever he penetrated to the hoop, as he had the bounce and hang time to pull off a poster dunk or an acrobatic layup. But he also got on his opponent's nerves with his effort on the offensive glass, often coming out of nowhere to secure a second chance for his team. And on the defensive end, he was never out of the play, always a threat to jump a passing lane or block a shot. And while he wasn't a great overall shooter, he was the guy you wanted at the free throw line near the end of his career. Malik Sealy was one of the most highly recruited high schoolers in New York State history, eventually opting to stay home and play at St. John's, where he would become one of the greatest players in program history, leading to him becoming a first-round pick. He was a late bloomer in the NBA. After a couple uneventful years in Indiana, he began to carve out a role for himself with the Clippers. But it was after his arrival in Minnesota when things truly came together. Not only was he a model teammate and veteran mentor for a young Kevin Garnett, he would also find his role as a complementary scorer and defender. But soon after the best season of his career, he lost his life because of a drunk driver, taking away a great person by all accounts, and a player who had just found where he belonged. Let's jog your memory. A Bronx native, Malik Sealy was named after the late Malcolm X, whom his father Sidney was a bodyguard for. And the younger Sealy remains one of the most revered basketball players in New York State history to this day, both for his time with the Riverside Church AAU team and his high school career at Tolentine, where he led the Wildcats to a CHSAA championship, scoring 26 points and pulling down 10 rebounds in the championship game versus Kenny Anderson and Archbishop Malloy. Then in the state tournament, Sealy went for 38 points and 12 rebounds on 17 of 22 shooting in a blowout win over Adlai Stevenson in the semifinal, and followed that up with 21 points, 15 rebounds, and 4 steals in a win over Our Savior Lutheran to take the state title. As along with being named to the All-City team, Sealy would also be a first-team Parade All-American and a McDonald's All-American. And Sealy was one of the most coveted recruits in the nation, with his recruitment even being covered by CBS's Dan Rather on 48 Hours, who would also end up covering Sealy's Tolentine teammates, Adrian Autry and Brian Reese. But New York was Sealy's home, and even though he could have gone anywhere, he went just down the street to play for Lou Carnesecca at St. John's. Sealy joined a St. John's team then known as the Redmen, who were coming off their first season without star guard Mark Jackson and a first-round tournament exit. The freshman Sealy quickly became a workhorse for the Redmen, as he played nearly 38 minutes per game to lead the Big East. St. John's was led by junior big man Jason Williams, but Sealy established himself as their second leading scorer and rebounder, and his impact was felt early, as Sealy's first ever game would see him score 15 points, with 8 of those coming by way of dunks. Sealy's endless motor and good instincts quickly made him a fan favorite, and he specifically used his length and athleticism to get St. John's a lot of second chance opportunities. But Sealy was most appreciated for his fearlessness. He was aggressive going to the hole, and even when he didn't finish, his failed dunk attempts still got fans out of their seat. St. John's was a defense-first team and looked strong over the first half of the season, as after 16 games they were 12-4, and had even recorded an upset win over number 4 Syracuse. But they would win just 3 of their final 11 games, as they finished with a 15-12 record, then lost to Boston College in the first round of the Big East tourney. They wouldn't get a berth in the Big Dance, but they would receive an NIT invite, and had some hard-fought wins over Mississippi, Oklahoma State, and Ohio State. Then in the semifinal versus UAB, Sealy dropped 17 points to help push St. John's into the final versus St. Louis, who they would also defeat to end their season on a high note, with an NIT championship. And Sealy's freshman year ended with him averaging about 13 points, 6.5 rebounds, and a steal per game. 1990 would see major improvement from Sealy. He would again lead the Big East in minutes at nearly 38.5 per game, and had upped his scoring to over 18 points, which would lead the team and be a top 5 mark in the conference. And he did so efficiently, shooting a career-high 52.5% from the field. And his career-high 2.2 steals per game would also lead the team and be a top 5 mark in the conference, which led to him being named second team All-Big East. Additionally, St. John's would get a great year from senior guard Boo Harvey, but they needed these improvements, as they only got 13 games out of Jason Williams, due to a fractured foot suffered shortly before the season began, which led to him missing a big chunk of the year. but St. John's was playing great regardless. They would start the season 5-2 before rattling off 8 straight wins and ranking as high as 15th in the nation, but they would cool down after their 13-2 start, going 10-6 the rest of the way. However, this did include a big win over 5th-ranked Georgetown at the Capitol Center. Nonetheless, it had been an improvement over last year, as they entered the Big East tourney with a 23-8 record. However, this ended the same as last year, as they were bounced in the first round, this time by Villanova. But they had done enough to get a tournament bid and a first-round matchup with Temple, and Sealy's tournament debut would be great, as he turned in 18 points on 6 of 10 shooting, along with 7 rebounds and 2 blocks, while playing all 40 minutes in a win, leading to a second-round matchup with Duke. Sealy again played great, with 19 points on over 61% shooting, while adding 4 steals and 2 blocks. And although Duke was the favorite, St. John's pushed them to the limit, but the Blue Devils held on to win by 4, as Sealy's year had ended with him averaging about 18 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals per game. It was much of the same for Sealy in 1991, as he again led the Big East in minutes per game and was now the clear-cut leader of the team, as Williams had graduated and gone pro. Sealy led the team in scoring, once again significantly raising his scoring average, as he was now a top 3 scorer in the Big East. He would again average over 2 steals and would finish top 5 in the conference in that category, and his career-high 7.7 rebounds per game would be the 6th highest mark in the Big East. And while Sealy was never a volume shooter, he would take more than double the 3-pointers he did last year and hit over 30% of them. After shooting less than 7.5% from deep last year, St. John's began the year ranked in the top 25, and in their second game of the season versus Central Connecticut State, Sealy would go for a career-high 43 points in a blowout win. And this would be the second of 9 straight wins to start the season for St. John's. But their most impressive stretch came over 2 weeks in January, when they won 5 straight games, with 3 of those coming against ranked opponents. And they would then go 3-1 to end the season, which included big wins over Syracuse and Georgetown. So St. John's showed that they could hang with the best in one of the nation's most competitive conferences, as they finished with a 20-7 record. But for the 3rd straight season, they got bounced in the quarterfinals of the conference tourney, this time by Providence. But they were again getting a trip to the tournament, and this year they'd make some noise. Round 1 saw Sealy play the entire game and put up 19 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals in a win over Northern Illinois. The second round brought Texas, and Sealy would record a 19-point, 12-rebound double-double in 40 minutes of action in another win, as their next opponent would be a top-seeded Ohio State team in the Sweet 16. And St. John's didn't just pull off the upset win, they rammed the Buckeyes out of the building, as Sealy went for 22 points and 5 rebounds on nearly 59% shooting in a 17-point win. And now a trip to the Elite 8 and a rematch with Duke was awaiting them. Sealy would finish with 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 steals, but he had trouble getting his shot to fall, and after Duke got out to a big halftime lead, St. John's couldn't recover, as their season came to an end. But Sealy's year had seen him average about 22 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 2 steals per game. St. John's had always been a defense-first team during Sealy's time there, but 1992 would be one of their best defensive seasons, as they only allowed about 65 points per game, but they also only scored about 71 points per game, and about 30% of those points came from Sealy. He led the team and the Big East with 22.6 points per game, and again finished top 5 in the conference in steals per game. For the 4th straight season, he led the conference in minutes, but this year, his career-high 38.7 minutes per game would be the second most in the nation. So Sealy rarely came off the court, but the Redmen needed Sealy as much as possible, as he was the only player on the team to average double-figure scoring. After a 3-0 start, St. John's ranked as high as number 7, but they would lose to number 1 Duke, then go 5-2 over their next 7. But Sealy joined an exclusive club in a January 11th defeat of Boston College, scoring 25 points in the game and becoming just the 2nd player in program history to reach the 2,000-point mark, joining program great Chris Mullin. After 17 games, St. John's had only managed a 10-7 record, but a February 1st defeat of number 6 ranked UConn would kick off a 7-game win streak, as they would win 8 of their final 10 to finish the regular season at 18-9. They would finally get a Big East tourney win with an overtime victory over UConn in the quarterfinal, but they would fall to Georgetown in the semis. However, they would still make a trip to the NCAA tournament, but it didn't go as hoped, as even though Sealy put up 20 points on over 56% shooting, along with 2 steals, St. John's as a team only shot about 36%, as they would be upset by Tulane in round 1. with Sealy's year ending with him averaging about 22.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals per game. Sealy's college career was over, but he made his mark, leaving St. John's with over 2,400 career points as their all-time field goals leader, while recording 102 consecutive games with at least 10 points. And he would also leave as the program leader in steals. And while there were concerns about his shooting, he was without a doubt a first-round talent in the upcoming 1992 draft. Sealy would be selected 14th overall by an Indiana Pacers team led by Reggie Miller, and the fashion forward Sealy would use some of his contract money to start a clothing brand soon after. The Sealy selection had many in Indiana believing that they would be moving on from high-scoring forward Chuck Person, and they were right, as Person would soon be traded to Minnesota, and Sealy seemed glad about where he ended up, as he felt that Indiana's fast-paced play would better suit his game. Ironically, after playing at a top 5 pace in '92, Indiana would play at one of the league's slower paces in '93, and this change in play style would lead to Sealy getting less opportunity than originally expected, with Sealy's below-average shooting really limiting his effectiveness. Yet reportedly, he had also arrived at training camp out of shape, which put him at odds with head coach Bob Hill, so Sealy wouldn't have much of a role in his rookie year, as he would appear in 58 games with 2 starts over the course of the season, hitting double figures in 10 of those, and scoring a season high of 16 in a December 29th loss to New York. But the Pacers as a whole had one of the league's better offenses and would manage a 41-41 record this year, which would be enough for a playoff berth versus New York. But Sealy would find himself back in the doghouse early in this series. Prior to Game 1, Sealy had left his playbook at the New York airport, and it found its way to radio host Don Imus, who would read it live on air. And while Sealy's teammates felt it was funny, his coach was not amused, saying that he would definitely be fine. Sealy would play 9 minutes in Game 1 and score 2 free throws, but that was all the scoring he did, as he would get 2 minutes in Game 2, then 7 minutes in Game 3, then wouldn't see the court in Game 4, as New York wrapped it up with a gentleman's sweep, with Sealy's rookie year ending with him averaging about 5.5 points, 2 rebounds, and half a steal per game. Hill was out after the season and replaced with Larry Brown, and it looked like new life for Sealy. His first game of the year would see him score a season-high 27 points off the bench, and over his first 12 games, he was averaging over 12 points, as he replaced an injured Derek McKee in the starting lineup for 6 of those games. But then he would suffer a badly sprained ankle in his 13th game and would miss over a month, and when he returned, he could never find his way back to a prominent role, as the Pacers had also added Byron Scott shortly after Sealy went down. So post-injury, Sealy didn't see much playing time, but when he got his chances, he tried to make the most of them, as after unsuccessfully trying to dunk on the Knicks' Patrick Ewing 3 times in the same game, Brown ripped into him, asking how many more times Ewing had to block his shot until he gives up. Sealy's response? As long as he's in the game, he's going to keep trying. So even though Sealy had such a great start to the year, he would only appear in 30 games post-injury and hit double figures in just 3 of those. The Pacers did have an improved season, as they finished at 47-35, but the postseason didn't include Sealy, as Brown opted to leave him off the playoff roster, and it was extremely tough for Sealy to watch from the sidelines as his team made it to the conference finals and fell 1 game short of an NBA Finals appearance. But his regular season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and half an assist per game. But come the 1995 season, Sealy would truly get a fresh start in a new home. Sealy would be part of a package centered around point guard Pooh Richardson, which was sent to the Clippers for a package headlined by another St. John's alum in Mark Jackson. Sealy was a young guy joining a young team in LA, as they also featured power forward Loy Vaught and small forward Lamont Murray, but did not feature a single player on the roster over 29 years old. So Sealy was in a great situation to revive his career, and the first step to this came when head coach Bill Fitch recognized that the lanky 6'8" Sealy was better suited to play shooting guard in the NBA instead of his usual small forward, as Fitch would shift him to shooting guard and even have him play point guard occasionally. 1995 would see Sealy average then career highs across the board, as he would even finish top 3 on the team in scoring and steals. He would come off the bench his first 14 games, and his production didn't look much different from his time in Indiana. But an early December injury to Terry DeHeer turned things around for Sealy. He would replace Tahir in the starting lineup and scored 25 points in his first game as a starter, then follow that up with 28 points versus Seattle, and would remain as the team's primary starter for the rest of the season, even dropping a career-high 34 points in a February 4th loss to the Lakers. As Sealy would say that he was able to play confident this season, and didn't have to worry as much about being taken out of the game as soon as he made a mistake. But his final game of the season came on March 19th, as injuries cut his year short for a Clippers team who finished with a 17-65 record and missed the playoffs, as Sealy's first year in LA ended with him averaging about 13 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1 steal per game. The Clippers continued trying to build a respectable roster, as they added a solid rookie in Brent Barry and 2 more good young forwards in the formerly known Brian Williams and Rodney Rogers. Sealy began 1996 as a starter, and while he would see a drop in his scoring, he would put up then career-high rebounding averages and lead the Clippers in steals per game. Over his first 37 games of the year, he was putting up similar production from last year and acting as a solid scorer and good perimeter defender for the Clippers, even recording his first career double-double in a November 10th defeat of Vancouver. But he would go down with an injury in mid-January and wouldn't return until early March, and when he came back, he was struggling to recapture his form from the first half of the season, even losing his starting spot near the end of the year. But the Clippers were still better with Sealy in the lineup, as they were 25-37 with him and just 4-16 without him. Yet this still meant they would finish with just a 29-53 record, which wouldn't be enough for a playoff berth, with Sealy's year ending with him averaging about 11.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. But over the offseason, Clippers fans would see Sealy in an unfamiliar jersey, but to his friends and family in New York, it just looked right.
You gonna let her call you a black hole?
Not a hole, a black hole.
What's a black hole?
A black hole is a theoretical object in space.
The 1996 film titled Eddie was filled with NBA players in real life and fictional roles, and it would see Sealy suit up in a New York Knicks uniform to play a character who was the polar opposite from who Sealy was in real life, as he took on the role of the arrogant Stacey Patton and received great reviews for his performance. And at this point, it really looked like Sealy had some sort of future in entertainment after his basketball career, as his track titled Lost in the Sauce was also featured in the 1994 collaboration album B-Ball's Best Kept Secret. But he was back in his Clippers jersey come the 97 season and would turn in the healthiest year of his career. The 1997 season would see Sealy become the team's second leading scorer on a career-high 13.5 points per game, and he would lead the team with a career-high 1.6 steals per game. And his team-leading 87.6% clip from the charity stripe would even be a top 10 mark in the league, as about 3 of Sealy's points each game came from free throws. But it wasn't all good for Sealy, as for the first and only time in his career, he would shoot below 40%, as he had some very rough shooting stretches over the course of the season. However, he would also shoot a career-high 35.6% from deep, on career-high attempts and makes. So while there was definitely room for improvement, it would still be one of the best seasons of his career, as he would hit double figures in 57 games and even record a career-high 8 steals in a March 30th loss to Indiana. The Clippers weren't great, but they had still improved, finishing the season with a 36-46 record. And luckily, that was enough for the final playoff spot in the West and a matchup with Utah. Sealy would play over 30 minutes in Game 1 and would score 12 points along with 3 assists, but he struggled with his efficiency, shooting just 4 of 12 from the field. He would start Game 2, but would only see about 17.5 minutes of action, scoring 11 points, but doing it efficiently by shooting 5 of 7 from the field. Sealy would get nearly 32 minutes in Game 3 and would turn in 13 points on 50% shooting, while making 1 3-pointer and 6 of 8 free throws. But he wouldn't finish the game, as he would foul out late, and this game ended in a loss, as did the first 2 of the series, as the Jazz expectedly would sweep the Clippers. But Sealy's year had seen him average about 13.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. But the Clippers decided that they just hadn't seen enough from Sealy over the past 3 seasons, as they would renounce his rights, and he would enter free agency. In late August, Sealy would sign with the Detroit Pistons. Originally, this seemed like a good landing spot for Sealy. He had the versatility to play the 2 or the 3, and could back up either Grant Hill or Joe Dumars, and hopefully transition into the starting shooting guard role when an aging Dumars decided to call it quits. Sealy got heavy minutes to begin the season, as Dumars missed a few games with injury, but he slowly saw his role get reduced with the return of Dumars and the Pistons' eventual acquisition of Jerry Stackhouse. Sealy's first 12 games had seen him get good minutes and put up production similar to his previous year in LA, with improved efficiency. But after starting 10 of his first 12 games, he wouldn't start again, and over the course of the season, he would see his role progressively decrease, and by the final month of the season, he was only getting about 9 minutes per game and had logged multiple DNPs under head coach Alvin Gentry, who had replaced Doug Collins midway through the year, as Sealy would only have 27 games in double figures this season, yet he would record 2 double-doubles. And after 54 wins and a playoff appearance in 1997, the Pistons were expecting improvement in 98, but would instead regress and finish with a 37-45 record and miss the playoffs, as Sealy's first year in Detroit had seen him average about 7.5 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal per game. But Sealy's first season with Detroit was also his last, as he would be released by the Pistons during the extended offseason due to the lockout, but his next stop would be his best stop. Sealy was released on January 22nd, and on that same day, he signed with Minnesota, as the now veteran guard was joining a young Minnesota team featuring Kevin Garnett and Stephon Marbury, but it would eventually be Garnett and Terrell Brandon, as a mid-season 3-team trade would see Marbury shipped out and Brandon brought in. Sealy's 1999 season wasn't anything too noteworthy, but he was a valuable rotational player and was producing well in his first 23 games off the bench, but a severe ankle sprain would lead to him missing about a month mid-season. When he did return, he was a starter, but he struggled and quickly found himself back in a bench role to end the regular season. But his bigger value was what he did behind the scenes, as a great member of the community and a friend and mentor to the young Kevin Garnett, as Garnett would say that Sealy's arrival showed him what a good teammate looked like. And Sam Mitchell would also credit Sealy with some of Garnett's development.
Malik taught Kevin how to be comfortable with being a superstar.
And even though they didn't have a great season, the T-Wolves' 25-25 finish was still enough for a first-round matchup with San Antonio. Sealy would see his minutes increase over the course of the series, as he had averaged less than 15 minutes over the first 2 games and scored a combined 13 points, as the series was tied. He would have a rough Game 3, going 0 for 8 from the field in 20 minutes of action, and then in Game 4, he would play nearly 21 minutes and score 6 points, but the Spurs had won both to take the series, as Sealy's first year in Minnesota had seen him average about 8 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal per game. But the 2000 season would be the most memorable in the young history of the Timberwolves, and Sealy had his fingerprints all over it. Sealy began the season coming off the bench, but he was performing extremely well on great efficiency and had really established himself as the team's defensive stopper. And he was showing improved shooting, as he had become much more reliable in the mid-range. And all of this couldn't be ignored, so head coach Flip Saunders would insert Sealy into the starting lineup for the remainder of the season, as he would start the final 60 games, which also meant that for the first time in his 8-year career, he had appeared in all 82 games. His numbers didn't show great improvement after becoming a starter, but they were still better, and he was consistent. And it was the little things Sealy did that made him more than worthy of his starting position, playing great defense, hustling on both sides of the ball, and taking on a leadership role. This season would see Sealy hit double figures in 50 games, while shooting a career-high 47.6% from the field. And he never shied away from the big moment, as he would hit a game-winning putback at the buzzer in a December 27th defeat of Orlando. And then just a few weeks later, the T-Wolves found themselves down by 2 against the Pacers, with just seconds left.
On the inbounds, it's Sealy for 3, and he hits!
So although Sealy never looked for the spotlight, it found him through his poised play. And when the season ended, he had played a major role in Minnesota's first 50-win finish in team history, as their 50-32 record would land them a first-round matchup with Portland. Game 1 would see Sealy take a single shot in the first half, but in the second half, he went for 17 points on 7 of 11 shooting, with most of those buckets coming from mid-range shots, as he would finish with a playoff career-high 23 points. But the T-Wolves would lose by 3. He struggled in Game 2 with just 8 points on 3 of 12 shooting in another close loss. The T-Wolves would avoid the sweep with a Game 3 win, as Sealy went for 9 points on 4 of 6 shooting. Then in Game 4, he had 11 points on 4 of 11 shooting, but the Blazers moved on with a win, as Sealy's resurgent season had seen him average about 11.5 points, a career-high 4.3 rebounds, and a steal per game. But tragically, that would be the final time Sealy would get to step foot on an NBA court.
Timberwolves guard, NBA veteran Malik Sealy died as a result of a head-on car collision in suburban Minneapolis.
What was supposed to be a night of celebration turned into a lifetime of mourning for many people close to Sealy. The night started out great, with Garnett being surprised by his family and friends for his birthday party. But as Sealy headed home in the early hours of Saturday, May 20th, 2000, he was involved in a head-on collision when his Range Rover collided with a pickup truck going the wrong way. And unfortunately, Sealy's vehicle did not have airbags, nor was he wearing a seatbelt. And it was later determined that the driver of the truck was extremely intoxicated at the time of the crash, yet would ultimately only receive a 4-year sentence for his actions, which resulted in Sealy losing his life. Sealy left behind a wife and a 3-year-old son, as well as a lasting legacy, as all reports confirm that Malik Sealy was one of the most genuine people you could ever meet. Whether he was attending community events in Minnesota, mentoring the younger players at St. John's and at his junior high, or even paying for a friend's cancer treatment, he was more than just a basketball player you could idolize. He was a role model in all facets of life, so it was no surprise when his funeral brought over 3,000 people to mourn his passing, yet celebrate his life, with the loss of Sealy having an especially large effect on Garnett, who would even go on to again honor Sealy late in his career by choosing to wear number 2 during his time with the Brooklyn Nets. And that same number 2 would end up being retired in Minnesota in honor of Sealy, with St. John's also retiring his number 21, assuring that his memory will forever live on. And it hurts a little bit more because after years of searching for where he fit in the NBA, he had finally found it in Minnesota. And according to Kevin McHale, he was even set to sign a long-term contract when free agency began. But sadly, he never got a chance. Malik Sealy is one of the greatest basketball players to come out of New York. His decision to stay home and play for St. John's was a surprising move, but it was extremely appreciated by everyone in New York. He became the next homegrown star to lead St. John's after Chris Mullin and Mark Jackson, and he gave the program everything he had for the next 4 years. His development in the NBA was a slow burn, as even after being a first-round pick, he never really got a chance in Indiana. And while he had some good moments in LA, the Clippers were a team without direction, and not the best spot for a player trying to find his fit. After his uneventful year in Detroit, it was looking like he might be heading towards bust territory, but he completely revived his career in Minnesota, as it seemed like a match made in heaven. But as quick as it came, it was over, and the NBA lost one of their most beloved players at the young age of 30. With a lot of basketball and a lot more life ahead of him. And there's really no silver lining to it. A senseless act took the life of Malik Sealy, and all that can be said is that while he is gone, he'll never be forgotten. But that's it for today's episode on Malik Sealy. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his St. John's alum, or this one on one of his Minnesota teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.